I'm well aware of just how my company works, which is super slow, super strategic, takes a really long time to make decisions. We're a nuclear power operator, so we are naturally quite risk averse. We often say there are 4 things you can do. So the first is a trial that would then lead to some sort of contract and enduring relationship. The second is actually the product or service may not be relevant for us, but it might be relevant for our customers, so we can be like a route to market. The third is, particularly in the UK, we get a lot of government funding. That's where the government will pay us and pay a startup and maybe pay a university to do some sort of exploration, and they'll de-risk that way. And then finally is investment. So we might invest in a startup.
For people that don't know you, you've spent about 20 years working for EDF across sustainability, strategy, technology, innovation, a lot of different roles across the world as well, and most recently as the head of innovation for the UK. And so today, we'll chat about exactly that, which is how climate tech startups and big corporates can move from pilots to real scalable projects together, so how to build that relationship. Want to explore where it breaks, where it works, what makes a great collaboration, and I guess how to try and design things from the get-go that will work out. Does that sound like a good agenda?
Yeah, perfect.
Before we start, 2 things I should say. First, listeners, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This takes 2 seconds, but really help the show. Second, thank you to Cambridge Consultant, part of Capgemini, and Climate Tech Supercluster for supporting this mini-series. When we chatted before, you told me that corporates love trials but rarely go to scale. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a $1 trillion question, probably. But it's absolutely true. There are a number of reasons why corporates and startups find it hard to work together, and particularly to go from trial to an enduring relationship. I think culture is a really big part of that. You say I'm a corporate guy. I'm the least corporate guy in my organization, but still, I'm wearing a jacket. I'm looking quite smart, and I'm well aware of just how my company works, which is super slow, super strategic. Takes a really long time to make decisions, very risk averse because of the type of markets we operate in. We're a nuclear power operator, so we are naturally quite risk averse, which is, from my point of view, difficult. But from the point of view of society as a whole, that's a really good thing that a nuclear power operator is risk averse. But it does create difficulties when it comes to relationships between startups and corporates. So what we try to do is de-risk everything as early as possible. And I think there's also a challenge about how you design a trial or a POC in a way that's going to be fit for the future. And honestly, I think it's impossible to predict the future. So I think instead of really trying to design the perfect trial that will lead perfectly onto a long, enduring relationship, you just have to focus on what the trial will do and how that will benefit both sides and the kind of questions you want to ask and answer. And then work out where you take it from there. So it has to stand alone, that trial.
For sure. And, I did a series of interviews today, and one thing that came back again and again is like we need more corporates to partner with startups to grow the startups. So you talked about the trial. I think that's where I want to start, which is how to design a great trial. It's a non-trivial thing. You shouldn't be like, okay, I'm just going to do a proof of concept. Perfect. Like I'm already done. It's actually only the beginning of the story. So how do you build a great proof of concept?
Well, I think you need to start actually quite a lot before the trial as well. So what I try to do and what we try to do within EDF is to build strong relationships with startup communities, because a trial may not be the best thing to do, actually. So we invest a lot of time getting to know startup ecosystems, being involved in accelerator programs that are provided by others, joining events like the one today where we're meeting lots of startups, investing our time. So we're contributing our expertise and our time and insights into the early stages of a startup. And then when it comes to actual collaboration, a trial is one option, but we often say there are 4 things you can do. So the first is, a trial that would then lead to some sort of contract and enduring relationship. The second is actually the product or service may not be relevant for us, but it might be relevant for our customers. So we can be like a route to market for that company, and we can earn money and we can help each other that way. The third is we, particularly in the UK, we get a lot of government funding. That's where the government will pay us and pay a startup and maybe pay a university to do some sort of exploration, and they'll de-risk that way. And that has to be mutually beneficial. And then finally is investment. So we might invest in a startup, and there we do try to find synergies with a startup. But it may not be that the trial is the best thing to do. So that's the first step. Work out what is the best thing to do between the two organizations.
And I think that's probably where we can explore these 4 different avenues. Obviously, you're not responsible for everything at EDF, right? So, like
Rightly so.
the venture parts is probably not the part that we will explore so much. I think you have counterparts that are doing that. But okay, let's start with the trial then. I'm a startup. I work in an adjacent industry as EDF or something that's quite similar, or I can help you, or you can be my customer. I approach David at a conference. How should we go from there to actually trying something together?
Well, it's a bit like dating, really. You want to work out where your interests are aligned. And I think there are 2 steps to that. So one is the company. So for me, EDF, we need to understand what are our strategic goals, what are we trying to do that we are currently unable to do. And then when you're talking to the startup, it's the same for them. What do they want to be able to do? So I'll give an example, and that's we are working with a startup called Carno. What they specialize in is digitizing the installation of heat pumps. So we have a heat pumps business. Generally, the process of installing a heat pump takes 14 weeks from contacting us to actually installing the heat pump. So it's super long, super expensive, super complicated, really bad customer experience. And part of that is because the process is complex, and we want to increase our market share, but we're hindered by the complexity of the process. And Carno, they've digitalized that whole process, or they believe they had digitalized the whole of that process. So we want to accelerate installation. They want to prove that they have succeeded in digitalizing the process. So you kind of got a common meeting point there. And from that, you go into the second stage, which is, what are the specific things that they have got? What are the specific things that we've got? So we have customers, we have customer data, we have feedback loops on performance and things like that. They have a deep technology stack. They have a bunch of different partners providing elements. And you kind of put that into a package where you can see both sides and what each side is going to contribute into some sort of trial. And from that, you can then define, okay, what are we going to do? What is the success metric? How are we going to judge if this is working or not? And both sides, at the end of that, can walk away and still be happy, where you've learned something from it. So even if it doesn't end in a contract, Carno has done something that is valuable to them.
Very interesting. And if I put myself in the shoes of Carno, how do I know what EDF's problem are? I mean, it's not I need to know what you care about in order to bring the right solution.
Well, I think that's part of the problem, is that you may have an idea, but it's all in the detail. And it will be, it might be something about the particular software we use to design the heat pump installation process. And that's the bottleneck. They can guess, but they don't know. So that's when it turns into a kind of a relationship and a conversation to deep dive into that difficulty. And I think that's where culture is really important. You've got to find the right people who are going to work well together, reflecting that corporates take a very long time to make a decision, generally. Startups want and are able to move incredibly quickly, and you get that sort of, difference of culture, difference of speed is really hard. But I do think that in those kinds of situations, it is beneficial for both sides.
Yeah. If startups are listening right now, what are your problems, David?
Oh my God.
Not the personal one.
Well, okay. Yeah. I'd say there are 2 areas that are particularly interesting at the moment for us. So I cover the UK. The UK energy system is quite interesting in that we have a lot of renewables. And so sometimes it's sunny and windy and sometimes it's not. And so you have this massive intermittent nature of the energy system. And one of the ways we're dealing with that is long duration energy storage. Another is flexibility. And so both of those areas are super interesting. Flexibility is really cool. You've got emerging markets that will pay for flexibility services. We're doing that for grid scale batteries. We're doing that for, really large assets. But what's coming quite cool is all these small assets. So how you flex, as they say, how do you flex your home? How do you flex your electric heating system or your electric car that's plugged in? How do you flex all those small things and aggregate them and connect that to the market? So that's a really big area at the moment. It's super exciting, actually.
Yeah, massive example in the US, which is this company called Base Power that you probably know of. I think raised 1 billion at a 4 billion valuation, so not doing bad. Super interesting. If we go back to that idea of, okay, we will try and partner, and no matter where it goes, it's a learning experience for both sides. When you go into a trial, do you need, as a founder, to come with the idea of we will, like, the scale aspect of it, or would you rather see founders that comes and say, hey, like, we will try, have this dance, and then if that works out, then we can move later and do something bigger?
I think it depends on the maturity. So I much prefer the first approach, which is super flexible. We've got a product. We don't exactly know if it's going to work for your use case. Let's work together flexibly, explore, discover together, and then work out where to take it from there. Because you can spend too much time at the beginning designing the perfect trial and all these metrics. And if you hit these metrics, then you sign a contract. I think it's off-putting for us, and I think it's impossible to actually design. I think it does work if the need is very clear, if there are a selection of potential suppliers, and then it becomes more of a procurement exercise where you can design, these are the criteria, we're going to judge on this and this and this and the price, and then, the best one will win. And that's just like a procurement exercise. Kind of boring and quite complicated for startups to compete in that space. I much prefer the slightly more messy co-creation approach.
You mentioned something earlier, which I think is very interesting, is when we think about partnerships between corporates and startups, we often think about a procurement aspect, which is I'm a startup, I'm selling to the corporate, they're paying me to have my products. You mentioned the other one, which I think is fascinating, which is how to bring to market together some products. Have you got examples of that? And is that sometimes maybe a stronger avenue to actually succeed together?
Yeah, we've done that quite a few times. So I just wanted to pick up on one point about the procurement side. You get all these crazy things like payment rules. So our typical payment rule is 60 days. So once you send the invoice, we'll pay in 60 days. That's a really long time for a startup that's short on cash. So that's what a lot of companies are trying to do now, is for small companies much that payment time. Anyway.
That shows the difference in culture between these two, where one doesn't have that much cash, and the other one, I would say, doesn't care, but it's much more flexible, right?
Yeah, and also I've had these conversations with our procurement team, and their position is always, well, this company is selling to us, they must accept our procurement rules, our payment rules, and there's no negotiation. We're the big guys, they're the small guys. So it does take a little bit of education on both sides.
But don't you think that corporates need startups as much as startups need corporate?
Yeah. I agree. I think the corporates will only feel the effect of not working with startups after like 5 years. There's a really cool example, which is we were talking to a company called Upside Energy in the UK. So they're a kind of big flexibility service. We were talking to them about 7 or 8 years ago, when they're really young, and we started a little trial with them. It was quite cool, but it wasn't going very quickly. They were bought by Octopus, and it integrated into the Kraken platform. So it's now known as Kraken Flex, the tools, and it's now massive. It's $1 billion company. And completely disrupted our sector. We were working with them before Octopus. We had the opportunity to do something with them, but we failed to seize that opportunity. We still pay for their services, and it's a really productive relationship, but it could have been much more strategic. At the time, right decision. in hindsight, you think, yeah, that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I like that you're very transparent about that. Going back to that idea of co-selling or co-marketing
Yeah.
something, how does that work in practice?
So often we will do this. So I'll give a couple of examples. We invested in a company in the US called Persephone. They do carbon accounting. It was a really crazy. This was 3 or 4 years ago when everyone was building carbon accounting SaaS platforms. So we invested in one, and then we were pushing that out to our customers as well. That's not a kind of service that we want to deliver or provide ourselves. So it made sense to just cross-sell to the company that we had invested in. Quite successful. It was just a very simple referral fee that they would then pay to us, but it was useful. So we were the route to market for Persephone in the UK. The second is much more obvious, which was for medium-sized solar installations. We have our own solar installation business, but it's often quite big. So if customers came to us and say we want solar, but we're sort of below that level, we partnered with a company called Joju, who are, a startup solar installer, and we would just refer to them. And what that did is it built business for Joju, but it also meant that we could offer a much better customer experience, because if we're saying, hey, we can install solar panels, and then we say, actually, we can't do it for you, that's not a great customer experience. So having that, backup supply is really useful.
One of the things I often think about, and I spent time in corporates before as well, so I have a bit of that experience as well. But in corporates, there is often this concept of ownership. So someone is responsible for a very small part, usually, of a process. I think as a startup, one of the key levers you have to make sure that you can sell to a corporate or partner with a corporate is finding that owner. How do you do that from the outside? Because it's so blurry. Once you're inside, it's very clear who does what. But if you...
No, it's not. Well, it's not for me anyway, but it's a really big challenge. Like, I have a couple of startups as side projects, and one of the amazing things about a startup is you do everything, don't you? HR, finance, strategy, sales, everything, product development, and it sits with you. The way that a corporate works is they do the same thing, but it's just divided among 1,000 people. And so the only person who does all of, or has visibility of all of HR, finance, product development is the boss. And it's very unlikely that a startup is just going to be able to sit down with a boss for a few hours every week to design their collaboration. And so what we try to do is be the point of contact. So we're like the front door. We're the place to come if you want to work with us in the UK. And then I know pretty much everyone, and I can say, okay, if it's understanding how we do a trial, you need to start talking to these people. If it's a route to market or an investment, you're talking to different people. You need to be talking to our legal team, our marketing team. So that's kind of my job, is to be that kind of entry point, and then sharing out.
That makes a lot of sense. So as an advice, you would say find the guys that's responsible for innovation.
Yeah, and it's really annoying as well, because I have no control. So I can be that entry point and I can help and guide, but I have no control. I cannot say, yes, we're going to do a partnership. Yes, we're going to do a trial. I can help make it happen. So on the one hand, yeah, I can be that single point of contact, but I have no ability to actually make things happen.
Does that create frustration for startups?
For sure.
What's interesting about your profile as such is that you have you leave the clash of culture on a daily basis because you're part of both. What are some of the fundamental differences? And that is maybe to apply the lens is, if I'm a startup talking to a corporate, if there are stuff that are irritating for me, let's make sure that it is normal. I know that it is a thing. So, like, what are the fundamental differences that applies to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, it's a good question.
I can open up with one that comes to mind for me, but for me, it's like the time pressure. As a startup, you might have, I don't know, months of cash left, and so you need to sign this customer in the next couple of weeks. As a corporate, you have usually no urgency for that because it's an innovation project, which is at this stage not contributing to the core business of the company, and as such, no time pressure.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely right. And I always say that we're a French state-owned utility company, and it is impossible to imagine an organization that will move more slowly than French state-owned utility company.
Thank you,
Uh,
David.
um, and I think a lot of that is, it is the utility company nature of it. So, and that I think is one of the problems with climate tech, is that quite often you are selling to companies that do move quite slowly. So yeah, time is absolutely one of them. Ownership of a problem as well. It's very rare that a startup is going to be pitching to someone who has like a burning deck, something that's actually on fire, needs to be fixed right now, which will motivate them to do things quickly. You're often saying, here's an opportunity that will crystallize in 2-3 years' time. So it is important, but you can wait until next month or next year before you actually do anything about it. So timeline's absolutely right. I think one of the things about startups is they try to move quickly, which obviously often means things are not perfect. So it's the kind of the good enough versus the perfect, where corporates tend to like things to be more perfect. So much more focused on sort of structured financial analysis and quantifying the potential upside and the potential downside, doing a lot more of that analysis upfront than a startup might do. A startup might just kind of take a punt because it makes sense.
Yeah, as they call it, the IBM purchase. The interesting story, which is you're never going to get fired if you bought from IBM
Yeah,
versus
right.
like a very small startup, right? It's kind of the idea of saying, well, no one's going to lose his job if he's not working with a startup, as opposed to he might lose his job or her job if they are working with a startup, and then it's a complete mess and it disrupts operation and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that risk appetite as well is very important.
Yeah, no, that's true. There is effectively no real upside for decision makers in an organization to take a risky bet like that. I absolutely. I could lose my job. If I make a really stupid choice, I could lose my job. If I make an amazing choice and we earn loads of money from it, I'm not going to, I'm not going to get rich from that. It doesn't really help me.
Yeah, for sure. And that difference in incentive, I think, is quite important.
Mm.
But look, we're getting towards the end of this episode. I think I would like to do a short round of short questions. Actually, 2 questions, particular questions. What startups should do differently to approach corporates? What corporates should do differently? So if we start with startups, in your role, you get approached by a lot of startups. What should they do differently to improve, to get more chances to get over the line?
I think do a little bit of research, actually understand what a company does. And often this will be in annual results, it'll be in the media, things that are difficult, things that they're posting about. So you can understand the priorities of a big corporate just from what they're saying publicly. So when I meet startups that have done their homework and they say, I see you've talked about this and I see your CEO has said this, it's like, okay, cool. You understand a little bit the company that you want to work with and you see how you might be able to contribute. Also, anything around emerging regulation is quite interesting. I had a startup approach me a few months ago saying, this regulation is about to change. It's going to be transformational for us and therefore for you. We are giving you the opportunity to get in and talk to us before anyone else. And it creates that, oh, right, I need to talk to these guys. This is a sort of a time-limited opportunity. Then that's quite motivating. So do your homework, find the hook, I think is really important for startups.
Interesting. And then if we go on the other side of the table, what do you think you should do better?
What I always try to do, and we should be better at this, I always do a reverse pitch. And that is saying, yeah, we're a French state-owned utility company. We move very slowly. Our decisions are very complex. We're risk averse. Here are all the downsides, just to be super upfront with you. And so we do this if we're making an investment. We say, we will not be able to make a decision in under 6 months for an investment, which is, for a VC, that's
6
super.
months.
I know, it's super slow. But it goes really high and a lot of people are involved and there's a lot of due diligence that we do and, it's super slow. But if you say that at the beginning, then that's clear. And it also means that, on the investing side, you might say, well, we're going to have to skip this round. But if we carry on talking, we'll be ready for your next raise and we'll have enough lead in time to do that. So we try to be really upfront about the constraints and the challenges you're going to face. Equally, if you're happy with that, we can offer you 25 million customers, biggest business portfolio in 4 different countries, enormous generation fleet, like all these upsides, market insights, 2,000 people working in R&D, labs, everything. So there is, there's pros and cons. So it's good to be just super upfront about it.
No, I love that. Well, look, if people went through all the way through the end of this podcast, what's the 1 minute key takeaway that we should give?
I think it's corporate startup partnerships can be incredibly powerful, really transformational. And it works both ways. Transformational for a startup that wants to learn and build and grow. Transformational for a corporate that has big problems and wants to explore new opportunities. But it's hard. Don't try to take a cookie cutter approach. Be very bespoke, be quite patient, design it and make sure you've got culture, a shared culture and a shared cultural goal as your objective.
Love that. And I think, to the transformation aspect of the corporate as well. Very interesting example you gave with the Octopus Energy company that was acquired. Obviously quite transformational for them. Too bad for
completely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for today. Listeners, if you like this episode and if you like the show, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or to follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That takes 2 seconds, but really helps the show. And David, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will put your LinkedIn in the description. Also happy to do an introduction. So startups, please come to me. I'll do the intro to David. Thank you so much.
Thank you.